I'm going to start making my simple syrup. I always start with 5 cups of sugar because it's okay if you have syrup left over. You can always use it for different things. And this makes a full quart. Now I'm going to add 2.5 cups of water. The recipe is 1 cup of sugar to 1/2 cup of water. So it's 2 to 1. Now I'm going to stir this and I'm going to make sure that it's all dissolved, because once you start making the syrup, you don't stir it again. Now for a box of the shredded wheat, what we're going to make today, you only need about 3 cups of sugar. I make the 5 cups so that I get a quart. And I'm adding maybe 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid. You can use lemon juice, you can use vinegar. I have citric acid, so I use that. I stir it in a little bit. I've got the burner on high. I'm going to boil it. It has to boil. I'm going to bring it to 225. Don't ever go over 230 because then you've got hard candy. I've got a stick of just regular salted butter. I cut it in smaller pieces because it melts better. Now the first thing I'm going to do is butter my dish. I do it very generously. If you don't have a pastry brush, you can use a piece of paper towel. I have pastry brushes, so I'm just buttering this down. Now that's pretty generously buttered. I'm going to leave the butter aside because I'm going to use that later to brush the top of my pastries. I've got a 32-ounce container of whole milk ricotta. Mush it up a little bit. And now this is a little too firm to use, so I do pour some milk, but you don't want to make it too soft. You're just doing it enough. You can always add more. You just add a little bit at a time. And this is where I add some sugar. Now this is about 1/2 cup, but I'm not going to put quite that much. I'm going to add that to the ricotta. I'll stir it in. So I'm going to soften this all up, get it nice and creamy, mix in all the sugar, and I want to keep it firm, but not too firm. Because if it's too soft, if I put too much milk in, it's too soft and it's hard to work with it and put it into the shredded wheat. Now, that's pretty good. It's not too thick and it's not too thin. I use whole milk. You can use whole milk, you can use 2% milk, it doesn't matter. You're just using it to soften the shredded wheat. I can warm this up now. I'm checking the syrup. It's not at the right temperature yet. I'm making the syrup now, but you should probably make this ahead of time. The milk is only warm, a little more than lukewarm. This is Poe's shredded wheat. It's the large box, 18 biscuits. I may use all of them, I may not. I'm going to open it up, and I'll open both of them so that it's ready. Each biscuit has a seam, and this seems to be the opening one. I'm going to dip the biscuit into the milk, take it out immediately, drain all the milk out. And I take and prick into that seam all the way across. I take the knife and I spread it open. So it's now laying in my hand, opened up. I'm going to take ricotta cheese mixture and I'm going to put it in there and make a nice amount evenly over the entire biscuit. Hold it in my other hand and close it. Now, you can form it to stay like a nice biscuit. I'm going to place it in the pan. You dip the entire thing, drain it, because you don't want it to get too soft. Take the knife and tap into it. Take the knife and open it up. If you leave it laying in your hand, it's easy to work with it. Take a ricotta, put it in. Just enough to fill the whole biscuit. Holding it in the other hand, closing it, and making sure that you're tucked in. And I put them right next to each other. This is Kanafe with shredded wheat. Usually Kanafe is made, the old-fashioned Kanafe is made with shredded phyllo. But this is so much easier. You can't always get the phyllo. I save all the crumbs for later. My mom would make these, but when we had St. Barbara's feast day, when she would make all her pastries, she would use the real Kanafe dough. My dad would go to the market. We had a grocery store. when I was little. And he would go to the market, right to the Greek bakery place, and he would buy the fresh Kanafe from there. Got another one here. Put that in there. As you see, I'm keeping them kind of close together so that they hold together as I bake them. Maybe some other time I'll show you how to make it with the real Kanafe. It'd be interesting to go to Post and see how they do these, see how they actually make them. So, we always served it as a dessert, but my mom used to make it and let us have the leftovers from the party before. We would have it for breakfast. She used to make all kinds of goodies, and I learned how to do all this from her. It's best when you serve it warm right out of the oven, but even after the next day, you can heat it up. If you want it a little sweeter, put a little more syrup on it, and it's delicious. Tastes just the same. That's why I always make a little extra syrup. I like to have extra syrup in my cupboard all the time. We're at 225 on the syrup, so I'm going to take it off the burner. Turn the burner off. Now I'm just going to let it sit and cool. After it's totally cool, that's when you put in the orange blossom water. If you put it in too soon, it just evaporates and you won't have the flavor. When I was at my son's the last time, his daughter, my granddaughter, made it. And she just loved it. So kids can do this. And now she can do it on her own. She's old enough that she can do it and make it, and it's her father's favorite. So she'll make that for him sometime, and she'll remember that Sito showed her how to do it. I used to be able to help my mom a lot because I was the baby in the family. And she was a little older when she had me, so I was able to get in the kitchen and help her with a lot of the things that she made. And that's how I learned how to do all this stuff. Just watching her and helping her and cleaning up after her. That was my job too. So all you kids out there that help your mom clean up, that's the best thing to do because then you learn so much from them. You're watching and you're working with them and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing it. If you really want to learn how to cook, you got to be with your mom or your dad. A lot of dads cook. All my sons do. And then you learn how to make all these things and you'll be able to pass it on to your children. Just like my mother did with me. There we go. So far we're doing all right. We've got enough ricotta left. Oh boy, this one's a little cracked on the end, but we'll just patch it up. And that's where I could use some of the crumbs. You can put some of those in there and fill it in. Put a little bit of milk. And put the cheese in, and it's fine. This is a nice sized pan. They fit in there really nice. And then I'll put some this way. There we have it. There's a dozen of them. So we got a dozen out of the 2 pounds of ricotta. I always end up with a 3-pack, but they just eat it like cereal. Now, when my mom didn't have enough cheese, and some people didn't like the cheese, she would fill it with nuts. And these are just walnuts with some sugar in them. Now, to make it a little more flavorful, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of the orange blossom water. Just flavors them a little bit, wets them so they stick together a little better. It smells delicious. I love the smell of the orange blossom water. You can make this ahead of time and cover it and put it in the refrigerator and bake it when you want to bake it for your company or for when you want to use it. It's a little sloppy with the nuts, but it works. Close it up. And it's the same thing. It just tastes like baklava with the syrup on it. You can use any kind of nuts. You can use pistachios if you wish. That would be good. I just happen to have walnuts already crushed, ready to go. That's going to fit in there. Now, it looks a little loose, but when you pour the syrup on these, the ones with the nuts, they hold up better. Okay. I just take this and I just kind of stick it in here. And it's just the wheat. But we'll put some syrup on it and put some nuts on it. Now, I wipe all my glass dishes before I throw them in the oven. And then they don't get all the brown handles and they stay nice and clean. They're easier to clean. Now, my mom used to take and put a pat of butter on the top of each one. To me, I didn't understand that because then just the piece underneath it gets all the butter. So what I've now started to do with most of my pastries, like similar to this, and these is just brush butter all the way across. So all of it gets buttered. And I do it generously. I mean, butter makes it better. And if you're gonna eat these sweets, you might as well have ones that taste good. All right, I just put my orange blossom water in it, and I'm stirring it up a little bit to mix the orange blossom water in. You don't want to stir it too much. And I noticed this is a little bit thicker. It might have gotten a little higher than 225. And I remember now that this is how thick my mom would make it. It's still flowing, but it's thicker. And when I started making my pastries, I made it a little thinner. I would take it just to 225, and it would flow a little thinner, and it goes in between the pastries. Like if I'm making baklava, it goes in between the lines better. But this is fine. It's nice. That's how it, as long as it's flowing like that, it's fine. It's sat long enough, and it's room temperature. So now I will bake my Kanafe, and this will be ready to use when the Kanafe comes out of the oven. My temperature is at 350. I'm on the second from the bottom rack, and I'm going to put this in uncovered, and I'll set the timer for half an hour and then check it. You're not really cooking it, you're just kind of browning it. I'm going to put it in for 10 more minutes. I think it should be a little browner. And then I'll check it at about 6 minutes. I don't want it to get too brown. I put it in for another 10 minutes because I thought it needed to be a little bit browner. You don't want to brown it too much because then the bottom gets too brown and crusty. That looks perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to let it sit for about 10 minutes or so it's not quite as hot. And then I'll put the syrup on it. It's cool enough to the touch. And I'm going to take room temperature syrup and pour it over the warm pastry. And I'm going to go up and down on each one and then go along the edge. I know it looks like I'm putting a lot, but you want it to soak down so that the bottom gets syrup too. So after I pour the syrup on, I'm going to let it sit a while again so that the syrup soaks down in and goes down to the bottom also. Then I'll show you how we serve it. If you make this and you make my recipe of the syrup and you're making it only for this, you can probably get away with just making 3 cups of sugar to 1.5 cups of water. That would be plenty for this because you really only need a little bit less than 2 cups. Now as you see, there's syrup down on the bottom. You can see it there. But you want to leave it there and you want to let it soak in before you actually cut them and serve them. I'm going to try by taking this one out first. And you got to separate them or you're going to have a mess on your hands. There we go. Look how good that is. Now usually when I serve them, and because it's so big and everybody doesn't always eat the whole one, I cut it in half. Look at the nice amount of cheese that was in there. So that was plenty. Let's try the one with the walnuts. See the nice amount of nuts? There we go. Yeah, it's very nice.